meeting of the St. Pete Beach Finance and Budget Committee. Let's stand for the national anthem. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any changes to the discussion items or the agenda?
Can I add just general discussion on budget maintenance?
Sure.
Or budget management?
Budget management? Would you like to do that at the end?
In the beginning.
Okay.
Provide that food for thought.
Roll call.
Member English,
Here.
Member Polanowski,
Here.
Vice Chair Greiger,
Here.
Member Allen,
Here.
Chair Semiragic.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, we can go to the
Budget management?
budget managements.
So I've worked with a lot of governments, and one of the issues that I've always had was that the government spends up to the budget because they think that they won't get that budget again the next year. That's always been a problem. I've never had a great answer on how to address it. The issue that I have, that I've always had with it, is we have 9,000 people in St. Pete Beach. If you spend up to the budget, just to spend up to the budget, you're taking away from each of those 9,000 people. Is there a way, do we have a way of, I guess, not rewarding, but making sure that we spend smartly and efficiently, and if we don't get to that, that us as a committee plus our commissioners won't say, oh, you didn't spend that last year, so I'm not going to give it to you this year. As department heads, I think every department head should really think about that issue, because we're going into, I know we're going to have this discussion about taxes. I know we're going to have discussion about revenues. I know we're going to have discussion about which expenses and capital items to cut. If we can save money, where we can save money, and again, be smart about it, you know, we don't have those tough decisions or discussions in the future. So my question, and we can make it a group question, is what do we do to make sure that we're spending efficiently but being smart about it and getting the best value for our dollar?
So I think there's a couple factors that this committee will see throughout this budget process. One of those is that we are looking to have a 96% spend. That's a metric that we're going to be tracking. We asked the departments when they were putting together their budgets to not ask for it if you don't need it, and if you do ask for it, we want to see it spent. So what we're going to be tracking at is if you asked for a budgetary figure, the closer you are to that 96%, the better. Simply because if we're able to track that metric, then we're able to say, to your exact point, you asked for that last year and you didn't spend it this year. So that's going to be a metric that we're tracking. When we initially met, I think it was workshop 1, we had talked about just the different variances that we were seeing with revenues and expenditures and how do we better shore that up. So that was one of the items. And then the other piece is that Francis and I and our budget team met with all of the department directors that are in this room, and we went through by line item each one of their expenditures that they asked for. And we went through and the departments went back and said, okay, I can reduce that, or, you know, we made some shifts in certain areas, which I'll talk about as well. As far as a good example is in IT, we've shifted a lot of our IT expenditures over to our IT director so that she can control and manage those items versus the department saying, hey, I think I need a new piece of IT equipment when she's the subject matter expert. We're doing the same thing with fleet and facilities as well, which has historically been managed within the department to say, you know, I'd like to replace this vehicle. Instead, it's going to be on a replacement cycle that our fleet manager and public services director have the oversight over. So we have done some of those layers as we've gone through the budget process, and we'll continue to do that throughout with this being the preliminary and proposed.
What happens when you get to, say, the end of the year and you have 86% and they're not to the 90, the threshold? There is a incentive to spend that. How do we avoid that?
So a few things that we're looking at just from our audit process. One is how can we meet our audit deadlines faster? And so one of those items might be that we look to have an earlier cutoff for our invoicing and an earlier cutoff for our P cards. So when we, to your point, if we get to that 86% in September and the departments say, oh shoot, well I have 10% left to spend, I'm gonna go buy a bunch of stuff on my P card, that's not a culture that we're going to set here. The culture would be, okay, well you hit 86% this year, so let's figure out how we can make that happen better in the next years.
And I speak for myself on this, but I had no problem if you get to 80-some% and next year you need that 100%. If you come and ask for it. So it's not like if you don't spend it, you're not going to get it the year after. I think if you make a reasonable argument of, why you need it, we're perfectly open. Our whole job is to make sure Francis can run the city. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And one of the things that we worked with the directors on in the leadership team was, if you do need it, we can always bring it back for a mid-year amendment. But if you're not going to spend it, please don't ask for it, because then you're taking dollar figures from somewhere else that could have utilized that budget. So that is how this budget was prepared as part of the process, in partnership with all of the departments as well. So they're aware that if they ask for it, that they're going to spend it.
One thing that I think is going to help us is the city manager's comment at one meeting that she's making an effort to determine just how much it costs to run the city.
Yes.
And that figure will be very interesting.
Yes.
Does anybody have any other questions about this, or maybe ideas?
No, I think it's something we face every year. And I agree with you that in the past, my experiences, organizations I've worked with think that if they lose that money, they won't get it next year. And I think that's where a good accounting and credibility system is important, so that we spend judiciously and not excessively.
That was my addition to the agenda.
Thank you.
I like it, thanks.
Yvonne, it's all yours.
Okay. You'll pull up the presentation. Okay. So thank you first and foremost for being here on a holiday week to go through the budget with us. We appreciate it. This team has put a lot of time and effort into pulling together each one of their departmental budgets, capital, personnel. So shout out and thank you to the leadership team for all of your work in establishing this budget. I did want to take this team through the process of how we got to our preliminary proposed budget. So we kicked off in April with staff initiating the budget process. Then we brought the Finance Budget Review Committee our workshop 1, which talked about our historical revenues, expenses, and our initial capital improvement plan. That was our big, large list of capital projects that we need to fund within the next 5 years. Commission received recommendations from this committee as a result of that, and then staff worked to incorporate any changes from this committee and from the commission. From there, we brought back a ranked updated CIP. We took the feedback from the commission, from the committee to the commission on that budget workshop number 2. And then we received some additional recommended changes from the commission. While we were doing that, staff had been working through meeting with finance, the city manager's office, for all of our budgetary changes, any reductions and things of that nature. I mean, we went through every line item throughout the budget, so every single one, and they're all itemized, and we're looking at it from the level of what exactly makes up this number. So we went through that with each department, while we were going back again through the capital improvement projects and incorporating any of the commission or committee recommendations. So We're here today at our preliminary proposed budget. We will go through, I'll try to go through some of these slides pretty quickly. I know what you guys got was a lot of information. After that, we'll take any recommendations from this group and we'll provide that to the commission, and then we'll continue to incorporate those changes. So just wanted to talk a little bit about how the process is different than what we've done in years past. So within your packet, you did receive, this is our organizational chart. So as we're walking through the budget, you'll see how the different departments roll up from divisions into departments and what that looks like throughout this budget process. So just wanted to put that graphic in there for you. So kicking it off, we have some high-level summaries of revenues by fund. As you can see, the general fund is primarily the largest revenue generator, followed by our wastewater fund. And the reason why the wastewater fund has the next highest amount is because of that transfer that we're currently subsidizing it with. Otherwise, it would be our parking fund that has the next highest amount. So just wanted to provide that high-level overview. As well as our general fund does have the highest expenditures at 40% compared to our other funds, and then followed by our capital fund at that 25.7%. So,
I have a quick question.
yeah.
Last time we spoke, we talked about getting a list of fees for the city. Did we bring that today? Did we have that?
So we are actually in the process of doing our fee study.
Okay.
And so the plan would be, once we get through that fee study, on our operational fees as well as our enterprise fund fees, that we would bring that back to this group for consideration.
Okay. Because I was just thinking, like, in parking alone, I mean, I know that we stopped charging the households that are residents. And I kind of want to know why we did that, and maybe do we need to reestablish that?
Okay.
Because that was a big chunk of money, and I know that we're kind of needing it now.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
We met with them last Friday on all of our enterprise funds, and we met with them a couple weeks ago on our operational revenue. So that's more of our recreation center and things of that nature. But we will have a full fee study that we bring back.
Yeah, in fact, we actually have a separate study right now working with parking, so it'll be
Okay.
looking at parking holistically, so it'll be looking at residential parking, parking on the beachfront, so all that will be included, so we'll bring all that back to you once
Awesome.
we wrap up. So we
Okay.
basically have 3 major studies going right now in regards to fees.
Okay, awesome. And you said we'll see that when, you think?
Yeah, so a couple of them, our goal was really to get them by October, but,
Gotcha.
with the storms, everything kind of got pushed back a little bit. So we, probably best case scenario, we bring them back for like a mid-year budget adjustment. But, somewhere after the budget's adopted, we should have those finalized and we'll bring it back to this group.
All right.
Okay, and then we're just kind of moving into what we would consider our budgetary summary. So this is just a snapshot of all of our governmental funds. So that's looking at our general fund, building, the resiliency fund, which I'll talk about each one of these in greater detail later, multimodal, capital, and fleet. And then we have our proprietary or our enterprise funds. A call out here is that we did isolate our parking fund separately as its own enterprise fund in this budget process. So just wanted to highlight that. Again, this is just another high-level overview of the entire picture, looking at our operating and capital analysis by each fund. And these page numbers also do reference, they correlate back. If you see that on the bottom right, they do correlate back to what was included in your packet too. So I'm not going to go through every single page because that would take us forever, but it has been synthesized a bit. So, and again, this is looking at our proprietary funds in that total capital analysis. So kicking it off with our governmental funds, this is our general fund. And so as we're looking at where we expect to end 2024, or where we're at right now, our financials are currently unaudited. We should have those completed by the end of July. And so we will have audited financials to include in here. I think an important note to highlight is that our financial advisors recommend that we should have 2 to 3 months of operating expenditures, fund balance reserve recommendations. That would put us at about 6.4 as a city. However, we do know that if we have a disaster like a Helene or a Milton, that is more in the upwards of 9 to 11 million. So we are holding over about 8.5 million, and this number will end up changing, and I'll explain why here in a second.
I have a quick question on
Sure.
that last slide. The 6.1 million in miscellaneous revenue, it seems like a major driver for revenues. It's the second highest line item. Is it really miscellaneous?
No, I'm going to take you through that too. we're gonna take a deep dive.
And then the second question is, we had the capital, at the very end of the slides, we have the capital improvements that we've discussed, the capital budget, and then for every slide throughout, we have capital outlay or capital improvements. What's the difference between?
So our capital is anything that is over $20,000. That's what our current capital policy is stating.
And that's on the very bottom of this presentation, right?
Yeah, we won't spend a whole bunch of time on capital today. I'm going to talk about what changes we've made based on this committee's, based on what we can accomplish in a year, and based on what the commission recommended. But we won't spend a ton of time on capital today since we've talked about it twice.
I guess my question is, what's the difference between line 60 on here, which is capital outlay, and what we discussed on the very bottom?
Got it. So capital outlay is going to be our items that are under that $20,000 threshold, so not high enough to come into a CIP, but still could be something that we look to capitalize on an accounting basis because it hits that $5,000 threshold. Okay. So looking at this from a pie chart, where our revenue generators come from in the general fund, so about 50% of that is in taxes. Our next biggest area is those miscellaneous revenues, and I'll explain those a little bit further. And then we're looking at our charges for services and intergovernmental revenue, and then our smaller buckets is our fees, special assessments, and other sources, and fines and forfeits. So this is kind of small, but this is hot, fresh off the press from the Pinellas County Property Appraiser. This gives us a snapshot of the other cities that are within Pinellas County. I tried to highlight and point out where St. Pete Beach is and what we're looking at from a total taxable value standpoint. So we received this July 1st, so that's where I'm saying that governmental fund, general fund page is going to change because that revenue number has changed already from when we sent this out. So when we're calculating the taxable value for what we expect to receive from a revenue standpoint, we start with that taxable value and then we multiply that times the millage rate, and then that's how we calculate and come up with our ad valorem tax that we expect to receive in revenue for the city. What we have learned is that about 70% of our residents or our property, or the folks that pay property tax within our city, residents, businesses, things of that nature, they take the November discount. So most of them pay in November. That discount has not been applied to prior budgets. Typically, we've just taken that taxable value, multiplied it by the millage rate, and then moved on. So where our ad valorem, we could say, would be 15.5. I think a more conservative approach that we have factored into this budget is looking at how many of our residents and businesses take that discount. So that's where you will see that we're going to project our property tax at the 15.1 million instead of the 15.5.
Makes sense.
I think it's really important for the residents to understand who is paying the taxes. And we hear this at city commission meetings and things like that. I think that that's something that should be called out, if you would.
Sure.
Residential businesses and things like that, because residents really need to know who is paying the bills here.
Yes, and we'll have that as part of our next one. The Pinellas County, if you ever want to nerd out on property tax values, they have a great site that just breaks out homestead versus non-homestead, and it's fantastic. So we'll include that in our next presentation about what the difference is.
Thank you.
Yes.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about our top generating general fund revenue assumptions and changes. So the taxes and fees we went and looked at on a monthly basis of when we received those, and those are calculated based off of our prior year historical actuals. Insurance proceeds, so this is assuming that we receive that full indemnification estimate back from the insurance company that says, here's the losses that we've had on some of our facilities or our equipment, and this is the amount we expect to receive back. In our FEMA Category A and B reimbursements, that's for debris and debris monitoring. We've currently received $3.8 million, and we expect to receive about another $4 million in the next 12 to 18 months. So that is part of this budget as well. And then parking revenue, I touched on this. We did create a new parking fund for so that we could monitor that separately outside of the general fund. And with that parking fund, we're going to utilize that money for streets, beaches, parks, and a portion of our public safety that specifically monitors the beaches. So if we're looking at this general fund revenue by account, that ad valorem tax number, as I mentioned, has changed, or it will change in your packet, and what I have presented here is different than what we just talked about, but we did get that fresh, hot off the press just this morning, so I added that in here. As you can see, when we're looking at some of, again, those taxes, utility tax, our utility tax gas, all of those items is areas where we went and did that monthly forecast. And then you'll see under there that large federal grant under FEMA of $4 million. Again, that's that Category A and Category B that we expect to receive. And then we also have our insurance proceeds in here as well. The miscellaneous revenue, that 3.2. So that will actually end up being tied specifically to parking. That 3.2 million is a transfer that we're putting back in from the parking fund. In all honesty, I was having an issue with the software system and I couldn't get the account to associate properly, so I just parked it right there for now, so we had it for our conversation today. But that is what that 3.2 is. And then you can see the 2.6 million in there for our insurance recovery efforts, and those are our larger numbers. We also receive through the county an emergency EMS reimbursement where they're paying for our EMS operations. So we have that figure as well. And then these are a lot of our smaller items, but you'll see throughout this budget process where we're looking at return on investment for things like our recreation programs, our pool programs, and so we did isolate that as we walk through the budget process. So some of our expenditure assumptions as we're rolling through, we did include a 2.6 cost of living adjustment for our positions. That is looking at what the CPI is currently for Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Clearwater. So that is included as part of this budget. We did not have any increase in our employee benefits. The city experienced a good claims experience resulting in flat costs for this fiscal year, so that's good news for us. We'll take it. That number I do want to highlight is subject to change because as we're walking through this budget process, it's currently based on our current employees and what their elections are, whether they're a family plan, a single plan. We're going to look to try to shift that to more of a per employee per month so that each budget has the same dollar figure tied to an employee. So we can look at it as a standardized fully burdened rate for when we have employees on there. Workers' compensation and property casualty, we currently have that in there at a 27% increase. That's a worst case scenario increase for us right now. But we are working with the providers, one, to determine if we could get a different deductible strategy, and two, how that's really going to come out. And that's just based on the claims that we had because of the storms. I mentioned this earlier, but we are shifting fleet, facilities, repair and maintenance, and IT related items to be controlled by those departments. Also baking in a replacement plan cycle. So for example, with our fleet, if somebody has a vehicle, they're going to end up leasing that essentially from the fleet department, and then they have a payment plan so that when that vehicle comes up for replacement, they're able to, they've already paid into it. And so that's how we're gonna start moving forward with our fleet fund. Looking at our general fund expenditures by type, you can see the personnel services and operating expenditures are one of the larger areas. Other uses is those transfers that we're making to the enterprise funds or to the fleet fund, but primarily it's into those enterprise funds or capital funds for capital projects. And then now we're diving into our departmental areas. So you can see that our largest costs are in fire and EMS and law enforcement, and then again that non-departmental, which is a lot of that is going to be our transfers that we're putting into the other funds, followed by public services. So. Okay, so I'm going to kind of fly through these next ones. This is each department's divisional budget.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does the software allow you to merge lines together?
It does.
On the next slide, what's the difference between the executive?
This one?
Yeah, executive and salaries and wages.
So technically the commission should be under executive salaries. We switched to the unified accounting system this year that the state of Florida uses for auditing purposes. They use that so that when an auditor is looking at a chart of accounts, they already know and they're not trying to come off of and understand what any municipality's different numbers are. But we could certainly, that 30,000 should be with executive salaries.
And it probably goes throughout this, but I'm not a big fan of new account numbers, so.
Sure. No, that's fair. That is fair. We're trying, and that was part of the reason with our switch as to why we went with the unified accounting system that the state of Florida uses, because we're taking that information and it's got all of this great content to it where it talks about, you know, here's the GASB pronouncement behind that. And so it's a really nice move for us as a city to be within that. It does make it a little bit harder for us to have some of those unique account strings, but it's definitely something that we're going to utilize as we move forward. So city clerk's budget, not a lot of change here. The one piece is that we do have a request for a reclassification for one of the positions from a administrative assistant to an executive assistant to the city clerk. So that is factored in the budget as well. City manager, again, very nominal changes in here. The biggest piece would probably be under that professional contractual, where we would be looking to potentially have some interns that we could bring in to assist with different projects, or, you know, that gives us that flexible staffing model to utilize as needed, but not a very large change in the city manager's office. No changes in personnel. City attorney, this is a contract that the city utilizes. So right now, we don't have any changes to that contract amount. It doesn't go up. There's no inflationary cost to it. So that's our current cost for those legal services. Community development, we're not requesting any changes. So this is where you're going to start seeing how those revenues tie to each of those different departments and what that cost recovery is for each department throughout the budget piece, but this is the higher level summary for community development for code compliance and planning. So code compliance, we did have some changes as it relates to, you'll see that employee insurance, because we're basing it off of the current people in those positions, and that's where we'd really like to switch to that per employee per month. Because if you're electing for a family plan, that's obviously more expensive for the city versus if you're electing for a single plan or if you're waiving benefits altogether. No changes in FTEs here. Planning, we did have some changes as it relates to personnel, so I'll jump to that unless there's any questions on that one. The reason why you're seeing the larger changes at the mid-year in 2025, we did add a planning manager position to the planning division, and so that's where you'll see that change and reflected from 25 to 2026. In IT, the largest change that you're seeing here has to do with the addition of one position, but then the centralization that I talked about earlier, where we're trying to bring all of our IT services into our IT department. And next year, we would look to have an IT fund where we're looking to replace technology on a regular recurring basis, where we're putting into that, we're planning ahead for the future. You'll start to see that throughout the budget processes as we continue to work together. Wasn't something that we could pull together this year, but it will be something that you'll see with our facilities, where we're looking to say that building is up for replacement in 10 years, or we need a new roof in 50 years, so let's start planning for that now. So that's kind of the process that you'll continue to see us work through. Human resources, not a lot of changes here. We do have the, let's see, I don't think there's really not big changes here at all. Finance, not a lot of changes within the finance department from expenditures.
So I noticed that a lot of the departments, the telephone has gone down to 0, and one of the departments, the IT, I think, went up.
Yep.
Is everything just getting reclassed to IT?
Yep, we're just trying to work on centralization with those telephones so that our IT director can manage those contracts and manage those services, so. In finance, we are requesting a reclassification for a finance technician from a .75 to a .25, so that would move that position into a full-time position. It's already benefited currently, but we're looking to have that be a .25 addition to our team. Fire department, you can see here that we have those charges for services, which is going to be that county reimbursement that we receive. We also have, you can see the largest amount there, of course, is going to be your personnel costs and benefits. And then we're not asking for any new positions in fire and EMS.
Did we get revenues from when they used to close the streets off for the races, the 5Ks?
So some of those that are privately run, that they would supply the funding for the EMS personnel. So we would get that, but then the costs go out to the actual personnel that are working it. So we do get revenue from it, but we are expending money to staff it, if that makes sense.
So it's a wash.
Yes, yeah.
So again, within fire department, you can see some of those changes, and again, those large costs, especially with the department that has a higher workers' compensation risk. You can see where that 27% is somewhat more impactful across the board here, but. And again, no changes to positions in fire. Now we're looking at EMS. And so there's those county reimbursements that we receive, any capital reimbursements, and then we end up doing a sort of a true up with the county at the end of the year to say this is what we actually spent versus what they contributed, and we go from there. Public services. So public services did go through a large reorganization, bringing parks, beaches back into public services, and so you'll see that change throughout here. We're moving through this. That does create some efficiency for Camden and his team, where they're able to have those folks that are working in kind of what's that public properties nature, work together on different projects, whether it's streets, beaches, or parks. So it has created some good opportunities for that team. So starting off, this is administration. Again, not a lot of changes in this budget overall. We actually ended up going down, so good job, Camden.
Can I ask a question, Camden? Would you benefit from an internship program with maybe some of our civil engineering colleges or something like that?
Yeah.
I think that's valuable to look into.
Okay.
I had a discussion with our representative, Linda Cheney, about, a lot of Florida infrastructure is old, especially the coastal communities, and asked her if maybe we could start a program that the state would actually task our universities, our state universities and colleges that have things like civil engineering programs, and then provide them a model in which local communities could do something. And maybe we could get something from the state to start a program like that. It would require some administrative fees and things like that, but that could help all of the Florida communities, and it also gives the students in civil engineering programs realistic experience rather than just theory.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mayor and the city manager have been working on some projects. The university is escaping me right now, but that is exactly what that intern dollar figure that we have earmarked in the city manager's budget is for, is projects just like that, so.
Would it be worth adding some to public services?
We could maybe look to increase the city manager's.
Yeah, I think we added it all under the city managers, not specifically identifying what department it's going to go to, but certainly that's something we can look into for sure.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily all city manager, it's
Definitely not.
Citywide.
Yeah, the interns would not be specifically working in the city's manager's office. That's just where we house the cost of it. So we had planned to put them in different departments throughout the city, so we could definitely look at
And I'm
it.
looking at, what is our biggest need? It's infrastructure. So it's going to come under public services. So providing the expertise or the additional assistance, I think just makes sense for our budget and for our city.
Definitely, yes, I agree. And it's the University of Florida that the mayor and the city manager are working with some programs right now. so.
good.
Okay.
Here we have our streets budget. So once again, we ended up coming down on some of those funds. Part of this is because we did isolate that transfer to the fleet fund that I talked about earlier into our non-departmental miscellaneous. I would like to put that back out through the department so that we're able to show the costs. But for where we're at right now in the process, we have that just as a line item in non-departmental.
Holiday decorations, is that a contract that we still have, or is that a proposed budget of $10,000?
Mandy can answer this, but I believe it's a multi-year contract. Is that correct?
We're in the second year of a 3-year with 2 1-year additions or extensions if we so desire.
Okay. It's a topic that's always subject to complaints from the population that they don't think our decorations are sufficient.
Oh, okay.
It's year after year, we hear that.
I will say there's some good news for the Christmas decorations this year. So the company actually just this week sent us about 9 brand new designs for the poles that we're the first city that gets to pick them. So,
All right.
And they're very nautical themed, so they'll fit in with the community very well. So
Excellent.
I'm hoping for some better feedback this year for sure.
There you
so
go.
It's exciting.
That's awesome.
Electric contract, do we have a contract with a provider, or
That's with Duke Energy.
how long is the contract for?
Do we have a contract with Duke, or are they a monopoly sole
Yeah.
Sole provider, I believe.
provider?
You don't have a choice.
Sorry, we don't have a, Duke is our only option.
Okay.
In this area.
Yeah, in this area, yeah.
So I know they can be for businesses, buildings, towers, and stuff like that, that they can be the provider, or they can get the transfer for the energy to you, but then you can buy, because we're all on the same grid, you can buy energy from different sources too, and you can go out to bid for those energy costs. I'm not 100% sure in Florida, but I know the states along the East Coast, you can do that.
City of Clearwater is
But Florida is not the same. Texas is the same way. One company controls it, and then multiple companies provide energy, and you can switch every year if you want to. In the state of Florida, it's based on, like Duke Power has this area, Tampa Power has Tampa.
Tyco,
and
Teco, or
by
whatever.
the state, all through. There are other power companies, but in our area,
Tico.
Power's the only
Yeah.
possibility.
So no changes to personnel. Facilities is another budget where we're trying to look where we can isolate some of those. You'll see that R&M equipment going up more so in this budget than in others.
Do we have enough people for facilities? It seems very small for the amount of facilities that we have. Are we comfortable with what we have?
Camden?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's part of some of the reorg we did with bringing some of our parks people. We're kind of treating it as like public property, so building maintenance, grounds maintenance. So we do have a wider pool of staff so we can tackle those types of projects.
So you can use all those people as needed.
Yes, sir.
And what are their qualifications? Like, do you have HVAC guys, plumbers, electricians? What are their qualifications?
Yeah.
For plumbing and electricians, we'll contract that out.
Is that,
So it's more not like technical professionals.
is that worth it? I mean, should we have somebody that is maybe a handyman that can do HVAC, plumbing, electric, just have like 2 people? Would that reduce our cost in subbing that out?
That's something I have to think on and look in a little more detail, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the great parts about the reorganization of public services is it's giving us an opportunity to be a little bit more proactive, and we can start researching things like that, whereas we were very reactive in the past and just kind of trying to fix the problems as they come. And now that we have a comprehensive management structure in public services, I think we can start, kind of planning, like Devin was saying, plan out when ACs need to be replaced and things like that. So I think that's certainly something that we'll be looking into moving forward.
So this is our parks maintenance that was formerly part of Parks and Recreation, and again has those efficiencies of working with the same crew there. So beach maintenance, similar. This is an area where we are looking to see if there's any opportunities for us to receive any funding from our county partnership for the cost of maintaining the beaches. So I did want to call that out. And then again, not a lot of changes here. We do have that code enforcement officer tied to beaches, since that's the primary role that this person completes every year, is doing the enforcement on the beaches.
So every day I've gone to the beach this year, every single day I've seen a dog on the beach, at least one. I think every time I've been on the beach, I've seen a dog. So are we allowed to find them now? Not me.
Yeah. I believe we have just changed some ordinances. I will tell you that code enforcement just got brought up underneath the city manager's office for a short, for really an unknown duration. We're just kind of reorganizing code enforcement. We're looking at some different enforcement models, things of that nature. So I do believe we are starting to clean up a lot of our ordinances that relate to code enforcement to provide a better enforcement tool. So I believe that is the case. Obviously, PCSO can do the same. So we're working with our policing partners to try to address some of the situations. We obviously know that that's an issue amongst other issues that we have related to it.
So if PCSO finds them, then it goes towards the county. If we find them, it goes towards the city, right?
I believe so, but I don't know the answer to that, so we'll get back to you on that. So I know there's some charges that go other places as well, so that's the only reason I don't want to 100% say yes, it all comes back to our community.
And if we do find them, which one of these services does the revenue go under? And it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can be.
If we go under fines and forfeits, it was that smaller bucket of funding that was like 0.3% of our overall revenue.
This seems like.
But it could be something we could look into.
It seems like people just want to give you money. Like, that's basically what it's saying. Here's $140. Here you go.
It's an expensive dog walk on the beach for sure. So.
Yeah.
I think that's our major beach crime, dogs on the beach.
Do we have code enforcement on the weekend?
We do, yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. So this is our library department. The library does receive some funding through their Pinellas County Co-op, as well as library fees, and then any donations that the library receives is another area that we have directly tied to our department there. You can see just a small change. They're working through some reorganization in the library as well. So just a small change with the FTEs. It's a little bit different because they do have part-time folks that participate and the team over there. So a little bit different of a structure. Recreation and aquatics, so this is that overall area where we were able to see any charges for services and revenues that we're receiving compared to what we're spending. This is something that we're looking at as part of the fee study. Are we charging enough for our programs? As a parent, I love what we charge. As the finance director, we got to make a change. So
is this realistic? I mean, it doesn't even look like they started working on the community center. Is this a realistic budget?
So we did reduce down a decent amount of the revenues we would typically expect to receive, especially with the gym. Mandy and her team is currently working on trying to put together a temporary facility for that. With equipment that'll be upstairs. So we are working on some of those items, and then through the partnership with IT and Recreations and Aquatics, we are looking at how can we better utilize the systems that we have in place for things like reservations or weddings, or instead of somebody having to call, they could just go online and book that way. So we're trying to look at some of those technology enhancements that we could utilize over there as well. But we did reduce down, I'd have to go back to, let's see here. We did reduce down our rent at the community center by half of what we budgeted for in 25. We did also reduce some of the other areas as well. But yeah, I mean, that's a fair question.
And when we do, say we take care of that and get it onto the second floor or the other, how do we let the community know? And does that cost money, and is that in here?
So the equipment is actually reimbursable either through insurance or through FEMA, since it was a total loss. And we have received that insurance check, so we are able to purchase the rest of that fitness equipment. As far as letting the community know,
I'm sorry, so you're asking about if we relocate the fitness center, how would we communicate that? Is that?
Communicate it, and do we have to set, I don't know, $10,000 in the budget for that, or like?
So what we would do it through our communications director. We've been pretty successful at it. Mandy and her team have done a great job. And when you ask about revenue, kind of, relocating a lot of our classes. So right now with the summer program at the community center, we've had to move a lot of like our fitness classes to the Warren Webster building. So we haven't really, honestly, they've done a great job of not reducing programs that we're offering. We're just relocating them. So obviously that comes with a pretty high degree of communication and making sure that all the partners know where to go for these classes. So we've been handling that all in-house at this point, and it's been working pretty successfully. They've had really fantastic, participation numbers in a lot of those programs. So we think that'll continue. And like Devin said, we're certainly looking at a place that we can start up the fitness center. It's a big want in our community to have that. So we're working really hard to try to find a location for that.
I always think it's probably good to celebrate that we're getting back to normal.
Yeah.
And maybe do something special for the residents.
Great.
Weddings on the beach. We have a lot of weddings on the beach. Does code enforcement do anything if someone doesn't pay that fee?
As far as I know, they do not. I mean, most of the weddings on the beach are permitted. They go through a permitting process.
Okay.
So, I mean, it would take somebody to report that it was an unpermitted wedding, and 90% of the time, it's going to be a permitted wedding.
Good,
So they
okay.
come to our department.
okay. Overall, this budget also went down, so nice work, Mandy, on that. And again, just some changes as they're working through what works best for the recreation center. You'll see some changes with what they have for total FTE counts. They are a bit unique than our other departments where they do have seasonal or seasonal temporary folks that come in for the summer, lifeguards, things of that nature that are just here for a short time and working for us. So they are a little bit unique in that regard as well. Aquatics, we have the revenues broken out separately from what we have in our pool admissions. So again, you'll see just a minor decrease in that as they continue to re-ramp up and getting folks back in there, and our instructor fees as well. So when people are paying for classes, part of what you'll see throughout here is some of the instructor-led costs throughout. And so we're trying to do a good job where we're able to kind of tie that back and show what is our cost recovery, what is a good benchmark for us to look at cost recovery. Is it 60%, is it 70%, is it 90%, or is it 100% that we're looking at cost recovery on our recreation program? So, and again, I already talked a little bit about their FTEs. So non-departmental, these are the revenues that don't have a direct tie that are contributing to the entire general fund. So those are obviously going to be the taxes and things of that nature that don't have a specific program that they're supporting that we've already gone through. For our expenditures, we do have some debt service that's related to our fire pension, or our police pension, excuse me, that's in the general fund. And then you can see on here as well, looking at that large FEMA cost for Helene and for Milton. Those are the actuals that we've spent. We still have some contracts encumbered out there, but that's where we're at as of when we ran the budget numbers. And then you can see the transfers to stormwater, the transfers to wastewater, and the transfers to CIP as well as reclaimed water. And that's for capital and in some cases operating. So that's where that fee study is really critical for us to work through and understand, how do we even recover just our operating costs in some of those areas. So. One other piece that you'll see, those credit card processing fees, that's an item that we're looking at to see, should that be something that is passed on to the consumer? Like if you're parking, should you just pay for that instead of right now the city pays for those charges for people using a credit card? So that's something that we're looking into as well.
The county charges it.
Yeah, that's been talked about for years, and everybody seems to be doing it now.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Do it. Okay. All right, we got support on that. Cool.
definitely.
All right, diving into our building fund, I think the biggest change that the committee will see here is that those expenditures for personnel services with the limited duration permit technicians that we brought on, those are in there. And then I think it's important to note with waiving the permit fees on the actual dollar amounts for 2025 are lower than we would typically expect. So just wanted to highlight those items. This takes it just into a little bit more detail. Once again, taking you through each one of those different line items that's within the building fund. And then personnel, this does have some requests for adding 2 positions into that building fund. The resiliency fund. So this is an interesting fund that was created back in 2023, and the intent was for us to take 50% of whatever we receive on top of our ad valorem taxes. So if we're projecting an increase in our ad valorem taxes, we would then take 50% of that increase and siphon it off over to this resiliency fund. Because we're not currently projecting an increase in our ad valorem taxes this year, we're actually projecting a decrease from the 2025 budget. We wouldn't have funds to divert over to this. This is going to be one that we're going to continue to investigate. The intent, looking at the comp plan and understanding, well, what was the original intent of this fund, and is it something that we need to utilize, or should we just be diverting these fees over to a capital improvement fund, a stormwater fund, or a wastewater fund, just based on the needs of that year? So we'll continue to, we'll bring this back again for you guys to consider, but that's where it's at right now and why you're not seeing us projecting any revenue or expenditures for 2025. Multimodal, so you'll see that large increase. This is another one that we're working with our attorney's office on. The commission was brought a proposal where the city could receive a percentage through an MOU for the multimodal impact fees. Right now, the commission has not approved that MOU with the county, but This is under that same MOU. If Tradewinds and Serata continue to proceed, then that is our projected revenue that we would expect to get in impact fees at that percentage we receive. So we don't have any expenditures out of here yet, but we will likely put some in here because these can be utilized for streets or different things of that nature. So we'll look to do that if that's kind of a placeholder revenue right now until we get that memorandum of understanding completed and through the commission. So our capital fund, you can see that we have not a very large fund balance in there. This is showing our different revenue sources. So our intergovernmental revenue, that's going to be anything that we would expect to receive from FEMA. The other sources is the general fund transfer. We did divert the $2.3 million from insurance recovery money back over here, since this is where those capital projects are going to take place. So that's part of why that transfer is so large. And then the rest is just to make sure that we're able to complete some of those projects. So this is summarizing it by what type of project it is. So instead of looking at it by project, and we'll take a little deeper dive into that, but you can see that since we met last time, we have reduced down the amount of capital projects. Camden went back through our public services director to say what could we actually complete in a given year, and so that's partially why. And then also what we received from this committee as well as our commission, and I'll talk through what those changes are. So our fleet fund, this is looking at taking in items that are on replacement, as well as items that were already due for replacement in the 26 budget year. So you can see those transfers from the other funds to support the cost of fleet. We also did put our fleet and mechanics in here as well. Historically, they were not part of this fleet fund, so we are setting this up so that we can show the true cost of what it takes for us to maintain our vehicles. So looking at our proprietary funds, this is a total summary of all of those enterprise funds all together, capital and operating. So in our wastewater fund, you can see that we're projecting a little bit of an increase in our charges for services, and that's just based on historically and those costs of what we're looking at. That $5.2 million is a transfer from the general fund to cover the cost of capital. So you can see with operating capital, we're gonna break even at the bottom down there with about 100,000 is what we're projecting currently. This is just taking a deeper dive into the breakout of the cost, but you can see we do have that $2 million state grant, as well as what I already talked about with the charges for services and those transfers. Overall, the increase in totality has a lot to do with all those capital projects that we have slated for this year.
Adam, are we still under a dissent decree from Florida Department of Environmental Protection for our wastewater?
No,
I do not believe so.
Okay.
that's expired.
So here's a quick peek at that personnel. Again, I've talked a good amount as far as what they're looking at. This does have an engineering technician at a 0.4 in here, which means that that other 0.6 is going to be allocated throughout these other areas. So reclaimed water, so again, showing just a small decrease in what we're expecting for charges for services in that revenue picture. $400,000 coming in from the general fund to cover. And again, you know, we are showing a pretty small fund balance decrease. We will bring back to this committee fund balance policies and what we want for each fund and what we're comfortable with. 38,000 isn't super comfortable for me, so we'll continue to work through that, and we'll be bringing that back as part of this process as well. So again, you can see those revenues are at about 1.5 we budgeted for, with expenditures of 1.7, so that's where we're dipping into that fund balance. And then there's another portion of that engineering technician request here as well. Stormwater, so we have projected a small decrease in our charges for services compared to what we budgeted for in 2025, about $400,000 transfer in. And something that I meant to highlight on some of these other slides, you will see on that 2025 budget that prior we were budgeting into the negative, which isn't something that we can do as a city. So this is why having it in this level of detail is helpful, so that we're able to forecast and project better, and just following those GFOA best standards. So I just wanted to highlight that piece. Not a lot of changes. We have an actual expense reduction here as well, within public or in stormwater, so that's positive on the expenditure front. And then our parking fund, so this is our newly created parking fund. Parking has rebounded. It's not as aggressive as what we budgeted for in 2025, but it certainly has come back around from when we were during the storms and no one was coming and no one was parking. So it has been rebounding since about March, back to what we historically see on a month-to-month basis.
Is there an issue with ghost plates? Like,
Not that I know of,
Okay.
but
I know that up north there's a lot of issues with ghost plates. People park, they have license plates that are not necessarily theirs or forged in some way, and you can't collect on those fees. Which
Interesting.
brings me to my next question is, how does our AR look on, I guess, the whole, do we have outstanding items from a long time ago?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if we do, I guess the next question would be, where will we put that in bad debt expense for?
Yeah.
Because I think that has to go in operations, doesn't it?
Yeah, it should.
Yeah. Unless it's over a year old, then it can go below the line. I'm not 100% sure of that, but.
Yeah, I can get back to you on that one.
Okay, so two questions are, do we get the fees from people whose plates aren't registered? And then number two is the bad debt.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So in our parking fund, you can kind of see here that our largest amount is our parking facilities, and then we have that 50% cost share with the county park, and then parking tickets. And then you can see as well, the biggest expense out of here is just that 3.2 back to the general fund for the areas that I had already spoke about. We do have some requests for FTEs in here with an administrative assistant, and then a community, and then we portioned out a piece of the community development director for managing the parking area as well. So looking at our total funded positions by department, this budget includes 160.68 employees. For comparison, you can see by department where those requests are being made, and we've talked about them as we've kind of gone through the presentation, but overall a 3.2 request for increase in headcount. So our capital improvement plan, just wanted to start off with the areas where this group asked us to, for some recommendations. So one of those was to continue the aggressive progress for Fire Station 23, which is in place for 2026. I'll show you where that's at. Gulf Winds Drive, we did push that out to 27 and 28. We also looked at the bids that were received for that. Boca Ciega Drive was another one that you guys asked us to go back and kind of sharpen our pencil on, and so Camden, our public services director, looked at that and removed out any sidewalk with expansions, and then we do have a $1.5 million grant from FDOT that expires in 2025, so we're going to ask for an extension on that. The Mary Pier Bait Shack, you had asked us not to just demolish it. I think we're still in a planning phase of that one, so. And then the generator project, consider a less expensive alternative, and we just have that as in progress, and then our fee study is underway.
Under the Mary Pier, that was also the shuffleboard building.
Okay, we can add that. And then this group had also asked for a request for compensation and benefits to look at what other communities provide their commission. So you can see this is just taking it by lowest up to highest with some of our neighboring communities on a monthly compensation basis, and then to the right of that is what the mayor or the commission could make on an annual basis, as well as whether or not there's benefit eligibility or not. So we have 8 participating cities that are not eligible for benefits, and 8 that are eligible for benefits, and then 3 unknowns. And then at the bottom down there, I just added in some mean, so some averages, the median, and then what the 60th percentile looks like for the neighboring communities.
Are these full-time commissioners, full-time mayors?
I believe the mayor in St. Pete would be the only full-time elected official on that list.
I think we need to change that. Increase their compensation, our commission.
I agree. I think it's been talked about in the past, and we haven't done anything, and my recommendation would certainly be to increase that
Okay.
money that we pay our commissioners.
Where do we get the money from, though? Anybody want to give up any money? Where do we get the money from? I'm looking at so my point of view, and I agree with you 100% that we shouldn't be at the bottom of this list.
Agreed.
But as we're looking at each fund has a negative, like it's not sustainable the way that it's going, where changes are going to have to be made. And they're doing a great job, reorganization. I think that's number one. But the answer is, yeah, I agree with you, but where do we get the money from?
Somebody else would suffer, for sure. We'd have to do some searching. Road projects.
Can we put Boca Ciega Drive off another year? No, that's just a joke. Sorry. So let's think about that.
If we get parking increases,
I was just thinking parking and
Parking.
charge residents again, because we went from, 20 a household to 0? Or was that household or car? I can't remember, but
We increased the parking rates down, the public parking rates at the same time we did that. So the idea at that point in time was to increase the parking rates to pay for the residents'
but it
parking.
didn't do that, did it? It's not an even wash. We're, I think, lower, aren't we?
So I will tell you, there's been some issues in the past with the parking fund and kind of the overall direction of it, the management of it. Certainly that was one of the big reasons that we're doing this comprehensive parking study, to ensure that we're leveraging it appropriate, that our residents are benefiting from it, right? Because obviously a lot of the people that use the parking are coming into the community. And I do believe at the time that was the desire, was to raise the parking rate and not charge the residents and kind of equal that out. But I don't think an analysis was done to say that, to prove that it actually accomplished that. So that's certainly one of the things, one of the many things that this comprehensive parking study is looking at. It even is looking at the parking in the residential areas to try to ensure that we're not, packing it with day trippers into our residential areas. So I think the parking will likely change to some degree. It could be substantially once we get this parking study back, but I think probably at this point it'd be a little bit premature for me to say one way or the other which kind of direction we're going.
It'll be interesting just to see when you have the numbers, and then we can make that decision.
Yeah, one of the things I want to caution is consistency. Consistency is valuable. The problem that I have is taking it, giving it, like charging it, taking it away, charging it again.
Yeah.
The consistency isn't there for the residents. I don't mind it, But if we make a decision, we can't keep taking it away and putting
Well, I
it.
think if we have information backing it up and saying, hey, this is what our initial plan was, and after doing our studies, and then we have some merit to, if we have
Make
to
a
charge
decision.
again, and it could be, even on the website, hey, the reason why it's not 0 this year, and just say that it went through a comprehensive, study and we needed to do this, whatever that is. If that comes to that, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think putting the onus back on the residents is probably a top priority of that parking study. I think it would be to look at every other option possible well
Yeah.
before we would get to that point. So I would agree with your assessment on that.
Right.
And I agree with you, and also, if we can just increase the other places, let the out-of-towners, pay that.
Or peak time, like I always suggested, peak time charging. And the reason why is I want to be welcoming to our neighbors. I want to be welcoming to the people that come down from Dunedin, that come down from Tampa, and they want to come to St. Pete, and they want to give money to our restaurants and give money to our hotels, and I love that. And I can understand on 4th of July, nobody can get a parking spot. That should be the top charge of it. But on a Tuesday night, when I think the Brass Monkey is still open, they should be able to come down and say, okay, I want to go down to the beach and park, and pay less than if they would on
A
4th
Saturday.
of July. Yeah, on a
Or
Saturday.
A Saturday. I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Kind of tough to tell them, how do you tell the customer the difference in the rates?
So a lot of places do this, and what they do is they put it on Park Mobile, and it tells you the rate as you're going down.
Yeah.
Yeah, demand pricing is certainly being looked at as a component of that study, so.
Good.
And I think anyone that uses Uber or anything, understands that. So it's not, something outside, it's not asking the world. I mean, I think that would be easily, as long as we articulate it, or it's on the Park Mobile app, it's a surging time or something like that.
Maybe another place to look for those revenues would be code enforcement.
The dogs.
The dogs.
Is there
The dogs.
a recommendation from this committee as to where the commission would land if we're able to find the funding in this?
When I looked at this, those payments haven't been increased in over 20 years. And this is just a little token amount that really doesn't provide any incentive for people to step in and say, you know what, I'm willing to do the work, because it does take work. It takes work to sit on these boards. It takes work to be on the commission. And I think that we're just way low. Start out double or tripling.
Sorry, excuse me, Carol.
I'm sorry.
Pinellas Park, I mean, that's a huge number.
They have a lot more residents.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
but it's really actually, if you look at everything, I mean, pretty much all the beaches are similar, except it's not even Clearwater Beach. So all the beaches are similar,
Yeah, we have to look at comparables when it comes.
and it's probably versus, because of the residents, right? Because ours are, our municipals are so much smaller. But, I mean, Indian Shores is obviously a municipal, that's,
But isn't the work effort still the same in many ways, or no?
You would think it is. I mean, being
fair.
commissioner is a
If it's
big job.
9,000, if it's 15,000, what's the difference to the job, is what you're
The
saying?
amount of residents you have to
Yeah.
answer to. Yeah, but let's look at the other side of it. Okay, we just got slammed by a hurricane. Everybody's hurting, and everybody's, I'm sure, lost wages. I'm sure lost deductibles. And now we're saying, okay, but we should give rightfully so, that we should give our commissioners a raise, because they haven't, I mean, we're at the bottom we're almost there. But how do you feel as a resident if we came and said, okay, we're going to take money from you, from this, and give it to our commission?
I agree.
So
I would say
That's hard.
because of the additional work that they did
Yeah.
during this entire, during both storms, post both storms and things like that, the amount of hours that they put in are definitely increased. The amount of complaints that they took.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate.
I am too.
Go ahead. You
No, you go.
But I put in a lot of hours. I had to do my own, I had to look up all of the permit, how to put together my permit. I had to figure out all the FEMA stuff on my own. I had to put in
too.
a lot of hours too. That's the devil's advocate response to that.
And I'll add that residents aren't happy, they're still struggling, and they feel like nothing has really changed from some people that I've talked to. So it's going to be a hard argument at the moment, I think.
I think there's a lot that hasn't been communicated to the residents and the businesses that the city has changed. It's drastically changed. We have a city manager now that is projecting, that is, after the departments, like Devin said, hey, we're actually going to manage these things. I know public services was, you know, a Band-Aid here and a Band-Aid there, and things were just patchwork and things like that. We actually have a vision for where we want our city to go in the future. So I think that needs to be communicated, Mark. And we need to get the residents to understand that this is going to cost us a little bit more. And we're actually going to have a managed city that's on a better path, especially when we come to resiliency efforts, rebuilding our infrastructure, which we all went through during the storm. You got water? Don't use it. Oh, now really don't use it. Oh, we don't have water.
Or no sewer.
Sewer.
So
I think it's all in how you message it. I mean, and bring in the positivity as you're speaking about, and then don't necessarily say we're taking it from, we're going to make you pay for your parking again, but it's important to know from where that money is going to be taken, yes, and include that as part of the message.
Or how can we just start getting that message out now so people
So they go, oh,
understand
that's great, yeah,
all the changes?
point.
Yes.
That's,
Good
I think,
point.
the first step, is to start saying, hey, we were reactive and now we're proactive. We got people now that are really going through these budgets. We're really tightening up. We've done some great work. We've done some great changes. And don't talk about the increase at the moment, just start to get that message out, because I don't feel that all the residents have that message.
All the newsletters, great way.
Yeah.
Maybe putting some signage up. Hey, did you know?
I think the newsletter is great. You know, I read that one today that went out, you know, so and it might need be a message on the very bottom that repeats itself.
Yeah.
Because everyone doesn't read every.
How about in the city manager notes that go out?
Certainly, I think you said it well. I'm so proud of this team. I do think that we're certainly on a much better path, and I think probably one of our biggest problems is communicating that to our community. I think we say it all the time. We talk about it. Certainly, I think the communication is better today than it was, before. But I think that's something we can always improve on. I think any organization, probably when you ask them, one of the number one issues would be communication. I think we do need to do a better job of communicating. I think it's getting there. I think this budget's going to be a good example of, again, like the city manager said, showing what it actually costs to run a city, and be prepared for some of these things that we're dealing with. But I agree with you all 100%, and certainly we can continue to work with Mark and his staff, and then come up with ways to do this.
Yeah.
And just remember remember when the sand was this high on Gulf Boulevard?
Yeah,
All the cars were
exactly.
buried like it was snow. I mean, people have short memories when things start getting back to normal.
Yeah.
And, I was talking to family that was visiting this weekend, showing them pictures, and they couldn't believe it. So just, optics are so important in this.
Communication is definitely better than it ever has been in the 30 years I've been here.
It's great to hear.
No doubt about it. And yes, we can improve it, but it's much better than it has been in the past.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm feeling I'll be the dissenting vote on this one. And I'm sorry, I just feel like if this was this time last year, I would say I agree 100%. But I think just the message that this sends to the residents it has to do with the way that they're going to view the message. And I think you're right. I'm not a marketing person at all. And if you get the message out correctly, that's fine. I think this has to be what we're looking at right here has to be part of the message. I just can't go to the residents and say, I'm voting for an increase in the commission's pay. after what we've just been through, and where the deficits are coming into play now.
We're not asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
No.
What are we asking for? That's, yeah, so.
Well, to Devin's point, what if we started with doubling it?
That puts us above Madeira Beach. So if you look at all the beaches, Madeira Beach would be the highest one. Well, actually, Reddington, because they have eligible for benefits.
Indian Shores.
Indian Shores,
Indian Shores is down
Mm-hmm.
below.
oh, okay, Indian Shores,
Indian Shores is,
and they're not,
And several of these communities are smaller than St.
Bless you.
Pete Beach. We're not the smallest
I
population-wise.
think it's something that needs to be talked about, but I also agree that maybe the messaging really needs to go out first.
I agree.
Because I do think it needs to be done. I mean, I will agree that I think it needs to be done.
And I think we need more information than this. We need population.
That would be helpful for
Yeah.
me, not knowing the area as much as you do.
Yeah. But I don't know the populations of the other ones, so I would want that too.
So we could add some things to the slide, population, size, overall size of the community, things like that, just to give you some more factors to look at and bring that back to y'all.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And start thinking of a way how we're going to get the message out.
Okay.
And I think it could be several ways.
I don't think we need to study it to death either.
No.
No,
It's
I
just
don't
got to be, it's got to be the right time, though. To me, it's got to be right time. And if three of you say that now is the right time, I have no problems with that. I just don't think that
No raise, no increase in any compensation
Well,
for 25 years?
it's a calling. I hate to say
well,
it.
I think.
It is a calling, and I would look at the minuscule
It
amount.
won't affect anyway.
October 1.
Oh, that's when our fiscal year is? Gotcha.
Well,
It is
you
a
start
call.
messaging now and make a decision after we get more data. I mean,
Because we'll
just-
bring this back to you all at least one more time. I have that slide coming up, yeah.
Or a week and a half.
I don't remember the commission talking about this specifically.
So this
They're
committee had
probably not
asked
going
for
to
it.
either.
And it's going to be our incentive
Yes.
and motion to move it forward. So I think we need some more information, like population. I do think it has to increase, but I don't have an answer at where the money's going to come from.
Okay, we can bring back population or maybe budget size comparison, whatever would be helpful for this committee.
Devin,
I was thinking budget as well.
could you get your surgery knife out there and find out? Perhaps there's some slop in there somewhere that we might be able to, and you need a starting point. Let's give you a starting point of doubling.
Okay,
I agree.
I like that.
Yeah.
okay,
I like that.
Great.
sounds good.
Do we have the,
And then we would be the highest on the beaches
Do we
besides.
have to vote on that?
Wait, that would be.
yeah,
I make a motion that
Indian
we,
Shores. So we'd still be, no, we'd be higher than Indian Shores. Because we're talking just commission right now, or we're talking,
do we have to make a motion on this, or no?
What we've been doing from these workshops is just taking the recommendation back, but I'll defer to Jenny.
I was going to say, as a workshop, we wouldn't do action items, but we can do recommendation.
Okay,
so we make a recommendation.
there we go.
okay.
Okay.
So after we met with you all, this was the Commissioner Incorporated recommendations from the June 10th meeting and their workshop. So they asked us to reprioritize dunes, so we ranked those as a priority 2. They want the revenue sources updated, so we have those at a fund summary level now. There was a question around building rentals and how we're generating revenue there, and so the fee study is going to continue to look at that, so that's in progress. We updated the description for the hurricane damaged seawall repairs project, listing out other grants as potential, so we have that at a fund level as well. And then under the phase 3 undergrounding, that was listed as a lower priority than Boca Ciega and Gulf Winds Drive. That was pushed to 2027, and then we did reprioritize the lateral service pipe replacements to a number 1 priority. We re-ranked the Don Cesar stormwater project to a priority 1, and we also looked at a phased approach for that project instead of that $30.1 million, so that's included as part of this budget. And then we look to simplify any of the street projects and delay some of those layers within the project. So this is a summary list of some of those changes from when you all saw this last, and so just some notes out there. I already talked about Boca Ciega. The citywide camera security system, that is updated with a phased approach for replacement. We have the community center seawall replacement. That was a question out there, but we do have a grant agreement, and so we're continuing forward with that project. We did update the dune walkovers to a 2. Elevators changed because there's a long lead time, and some of those payments will likely extend beyond 26, so that was another change. Hurricane damage right-of-way rehabilitation, we spread those improvements over 2 years. We looked at the hurricane damage seawall, and again, that has that updated description to remove the reference to East Maritina Drive. Pass-A-Grille, we have looking at doing an award, a design build contract, so we'll look to complete design and permitting in 26 and then start construction in started in 26 but complete in 27, so that was an $8 million project that we look to phase over 2 years. And then we have our shoreline protection improvements, so again, looking at the scheduled asset management plan. That one did stay because we'd had deferred that from 23, 24, and 25, but it also has some 26 planned improvements in it. So I wanted to highlight some of those changes in here. And then looking at the biggest piece here is the Don Cesar and the Boca Ciega area resiliency adaptation project. We did put in $800,000 as part of this budget. We are trying to pursue a 75% grant match for that, so that revenue is also factored in there as well. So those were some of the changes that the commission had asked us to do, and we've baked into this budget process. I'm not going to take you, we've already done these twice, so I'm not going to take you all through these. It's part of the packet. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, but I'm going to kind of scream through all of our capital since we spent so much time on it. So I'll just keep going. So this is where we would just look. I think Adam and I have some items that we have for recommendation from this group. Do we want to do maybe a summary, or I think we've captured everything that you guys want us to bring back to the commission as part of their workshop on Tuesday. And then the next time we meet, we're going to take a deep dive into the ad valorem tax analysis. So we'll be providing homestead versus non-homestead, what we're projecting. This did not have an increase in millage for the budget, so that was a flat millage. And then we'll bring back any summary of changes. There likely won't be many, but we will see where we can maybe carve out some funds based on the direction. And then we'll have that tentative budget with the summary of changes in August, and primarily those are going to be capital projects that won't be completed in 27 that we need, or 25 that we need to reappropriate into 26. So
Did we say that we wanted to break down the businesses versus our residential?
Yes.
Okay.
yep,
She already said she, yeah.
yeah, that tool is really cool if you haven't seen it. It's super
just-
fun to nerd out on.
Just to bring this to everybody's attention also, the biggest line item was EMS and fire, right? Okay, EMS and fire. So I did a little study earlier this year and found out who is using EMS and fire. And it tends to be more business focused. So up and down Gulf Boulevard tends to be the focus on that.
Tourists.
Tourists. Chief, you confirm that?
Yes.
So, who's using our services? When we look at enterprise funds and things like that, we should factor that in as well. It's not the residents that are, I shouldn't say that. It's the residents benefit, but we're paying for the tourists who are utilizing the resorts and hotels and the visitors.
And how do we get compensation for that? That's been a topic that's been discussed for several years, that the majority of the calls, EMS service, are not the residents.
That's right.
We probably have data. I don't know if the chief has that, but
Oh, we do.
we've talked
I
about it.
looked at it.
Yeah, we've talked about it. And it's so how do you get the financing from that, from the businesses? The question is, how do we do that financially? I don't know.
I don't know either.
EMS tax.
Yeah, on the bill.
Well, the county already charges an EMS tax, so that's where almost 50% of the budget comes from fire and EMS is from that EMS tax. But, you know, we are doing fee studies. You know, certainly we're trying to look at it, all the revenue options are out there, but those are great points.
So, so the hotels, they get hotel tax, right? Do they have a bed tax too?
They do, yes, sir.
And then, I guess there's no landlord tax for people that are renting their house on a monthly basis.
There is, but that's all collected at a county level, and we don't receive any of that
Yeah.
currently.
We could, but the problem is putting that in place.
We are certainly working with our county partners to see, you know, how we can leverage those funds and bring more back into the community. I'll tell you, really, from a perspective of what actually comes back, beach renourishment is really the only thing that we see back here in St. Pete Beach from bed tax money. You know, it definitely goes other places. It's a complicated matter, but certainly something that we're finally starting to look at and see what we can do with our county partners.
And it's all of the beach communities.
It is.
Are the same way.
And it's been talked about in the past, but nothing has been done. I'm glad you're looking at it.
Definitely.
I appreciate
If I'm
that.
reading this right, it's, okay, so we're all part of Pinellas County, and you guys had this great thing that tourists come to see, so we're going to collect all this money and distribute it equally throughout Pinellas County.
It's not equally, no.
Where does the money go?
Well, $25 million to the Dolly,
To the what?
the Dolly Museum improvements. The proposed 300 and some odd million to contribute to the Tropicana and the redevelopment of that district there. But there's constraints on the bed tax, the tourist development tax. There are constraints. And I've talked with Commissioner Scott, Commissioner Nowicki, and Commissioner Scheer, and also brought this up to 3 state representatives that we need help with the infrastructure on these communities. And the lobby up there for the hospitality and leisure is very strong in Tallahassee. So it's a state law that would have to change.
It is definitely regulated at the state level and then regulated again at the local level, so there's certainly a lot of layers to dig into. I'll tell you, just in general, I believe in Pinellas County, 60% of it goes to advertising right off the top, and then that leaves that extra 40% to go to some of the projects that you mentioned. So it is a complicated matter that I'm happy that conversations are finally starting to begin, and appreciate you know, you speaking to those individuals, because that's definitely helpful from a city perspective.
Devin?
Yes.
We had some money that we were giving out grants for beautification. Do we still have any of that money left? That residents could go ahead and beautify the right-of-way and things like that and get a grant from the city?
No.
None of that? Okay.
That was real, and it was happening. I guess it went away.
What I was going to recommend is we find some money. If you look at, I'm coming into Pass-A-Grille, and I'm looking at the Don Cesar that just did all of these updates and redid their landscaping, and you look at the boulevard there in front of the Don Cesar, and it looks bad. Looks bad. It's one of the entrances to our city looks bad because the Indian hawthorn there is destroyed. The bricks are settling in there and things like this. Good. Commissioner from District 4 is here. So I'm looking at a win-win situation to give the chief something to deal with. Our firefighters are in this temporary facility. That's, he says it's better than what I lived in Iraq. I haven't visited, but that's what that's what the facility looks like that we lived in Iraq. Our EMS folks deserve something decent. At the last meeting, I brought up any way to expedite this, and we were looking at it, but they're going to be there for a while. The chief was looking at a way to go to the Don Cesar and maybe get our firefighters a chance to utilize their workout facilities, which are right there, located right off of the parking lot at the Suntan Center. It'd be very convenient. So if we offered the Don Cesar, maybe, hey, how about if the city redoes the landscaping there that is commensurate with the way that the Don Cesar has redone their landscaping? Could you allow our firefighters to come in? I'm just looking for a win-win for the community. Is there any funds that we could find that, I don't know, a few $1,000s that we could look into doing something like that to give the chief something to barter with the Don Cesar? And I have a contact chief at the Don for you to talk to, the sales director.
Yeah, I do know the grant program that you're speaking of that was in place. We can look back at that, certainly, you know, take a look at things, see what we can bring back. But, you know, there are certainly business partners that are working with us to beautify the area. Right now, we're working with the Corey Business Association to, you know, to revamp. Obviously, the landscaping took a huge hit with all the salt water that, you know, that came into our area. So certainly we'll put that on the list.
And the state grant for Gulf Boulevard beautification does not go down in front of the Don.
Yeah, but is Camden there?
That's correct. It doesn't currently go, but I think we have enough funding where we'll have some extras through that, so we could open that conversation with the state and see if we can expand that a little bit south.
Good. So that might answer that beautification question.
And again, it's just a tool so that we can properly take care of our EMS personnel. I got nothing now.
I got nothing.
Great job, guys.
Yeah, that was good.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. And department heads, thanks. Thanks for doing what you're doing out there, being proactive, and city manager and everybody who's doing it. Thank you for what you're doing so that we have a city that is functioning, not just surviving.
That's like I was saying, people are so shocked with how well we've come back after the hurricane, so it's awesome.
Thank you. It means a lot to us for sure that have been through it. So thank you very much for the kind words.
Awesome.
Shall we adjourn?
All right.
Anything else? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
There it is.
Great job.